The town of Valewood never forgave outsiders, but it forgave even less those who decided to stay. Sheriff Thomas Lynch sat in his office, which smelled of dampness, old leather, and coffee that was far too strong. The clock read 3:14 a.m. outside the window. July rain pounded against the window like a wall, washing away the only paved road connecting this backwater to civilization. Suddenly, the phone on the desk erupted with a sharp, frantic ring. Lynch picked up the receiver before the second ring. All that could be heard on the other end of the line was heavy, raspy breathing and the sound of the downpour. "Lynch speaking," he said hoarsely. "Tom," came the trembling voice of Martha, the young dispatcher. "You need to come to the old sawmill. Right now." "What's going on, Martha? Did some teenagers break the windows again?" "No, Tom." Her voice broke into a whisper, frozen with pure, primal terror. "At the main gate. There's a body hanging there. And, Tom, your name is burned into his chest, and we found your old gold watch in his pocket. The very one you lost 20 years ago when your sister disappeared." The rain outside seemed to grow even louder, but for Lynch, a dead, icy silence fell over the room. The old wound he'd been hiding beneath his sheriff's badge burst open in an instant. Valewood had finally decided to collect what was owed to him, and the price would be bloody. What will Lynch do next when he arrives at the crime scene, and what secrets does this small town hide? Part 2. Facing the past. Lynch's old Ford came to a heavy groan at the rusty gates of the sawmill. The beams of the xenon headlights cut through the solid wall of the downpour, snatching from the darkness something that would make even an experienced sheriff's stomach turn. The body swung on a thick chain attached to the top beam of the gate. Water ran down the pale, soaked skin of the tortured man. Rough, charred marks were blackened on his torn shirt, a burned-in brand consisting of 4 letters, L-I-N-C. Martha stood a little to the side under a huge umbrella. Her flashlight trembled, her face whiter than chalk. When Thomas approached, she silently handed him a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was him. A heavy, gold pocket watch with the words TL from father engraved on the caseback. The hands froze at 3:14, exactly at the time when the phone had rung in Lynch's office a minute earlier. The first steps of the investigation. Lynch clenched the flashlight between his teeth, pulled on his rubber gloves, and moved closer to the victim. Professional instinct momentarily drowned out his personal pain. Examination of the body. The victim was about 40 years old. His hands were clean, without calluses, not a local lumberjack or farmer. A stranger. But the most terrible thing was revealed when Lynch lifted the victim's head to examine his face. Despite the signs of torture, a strange, eerie smile froze on the stranger's lips. A strange detail. Something was clenched in the victim's fist. Lynch forced his fingers apart. A soggy scrap of a photograph fell into his palm. It was an old photograph from 20 years ago. It showed a little girl, Thomas' sister, Emily, on the day she disappeared. But her face had been neatly cut out with a blade. "He knows where she is," the sheriff thought. "Or whoever hung him here wants me to think so." Mysteries that come to life. Valewood hadn't just been silent for 20 years, it had been actively hiding the truth. And now, as Thomas began to piece together the first details, the town's old sins were coming to the surface. The secret society of the Valewood Circle. Lynch's father often repeated before his death that it wasn't people who took Emily, but the town itself, the local elite, the mayor, the sawmill owner. And the old doctor had closed the case in 3 days 20 years ago. The watch, which was thought to be lost in the woods, could actually have been taken as a trophy by one of their own, a witness from the past. Lynch recalled that the only person who claimed to have seen Emily's kidnapper was an old tramp named Ben, but the day after her disappearance, Ben was committed to a psychiatric hospital outside the city, accused of alcoholic psychosis. No one listened to his testimony at the time. Symbolism of time. The time 3:14 was not accidental. It was at this time 20 years ago that Thomas's mother, who did not survive the disappearance of her daughter, stopped her heart. The killer knows every psychological pain point of the sheriff. Lynch turned to Martha. His eyes turned into two ice shards. Martha, take the body down and take it to the morgue. Don't tell anyone about the watch and the photo. If the mayor or the press ask, it's just a simple robbery that ended in murder. Where are you going, Sheriff? The girl asked quietly, wiping the raindrops from her face. Thomas got into the car and started the engine, which roared menacingly in the stillness of the night. I'm going to visit old Ben in the hospital. It's time to find out what he saw the night Valewood took my sister. What truth is the mental hospital hiding, and will Lynch have time to interrogate Ben before the killer takes out the last witness? Asterisk. Part 3. Anatomy of Silence. Old St. Jude Mental Hospital stood on a hill outside town, like a gloomy crypt. The downpour had turned the driveway into a solid mess, but Lynch pressed the accelerator, ignoring the protests of the old engine. The foreboding of disaster burned inside him harder than the stale coffee. As the Ford screeched to a halt at the main entrance, Thomas noticed the first disturbing detail. The hospital's massive oak doors were ajar. Inside was a total, unnatural darkness. The electricity in the forest district went out often, but here the emergency generator was supposed to be working. He pulled his service Glock from his holster, turned on the heavy metal flashlight, and stepped through the door. The halls of St. Jude. The air smelled of ozone, medicine, and something sweetly ironic, blood. Lynch quickened his pace as he walked down the long corridor of the third floor where the seriously ill were kept. The light of his flashlight caught the peeling walls and the closed rooms, from which came the low, frightened whispers of those who feared the dark. Near room number 314, old Ben's room. Lynch stopped. His heart pounded in his temples. The door was open. On the floor in a pool of his own blood lay the night orderly. His throat had been cut with one precise, professional movement. The killer had acted coldly and quickly. He had only been a few minutes ahead of the sheriff. The last confession of a tramp. Lynch burst into the room. Old Ben was alive, but his time was running out. He sat on the bed, pressing his hands to his bloody chest. The old man's eyes roamed the room, full of madness and wild terror. Seeing Lynch's sheriff's badge, he suddenly fell silent and laughed hoarsely, spitting blood. You're too late, Lynch boy, Ben whispered, grabbing Thomas by the sleeve of his jacket with a dirty, sticky hand. It's back. The circle is closing. Who did it, Ben? Lynch pressed a towel to his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Who took Emily 20 years ago? Speak. The old man pulled the sheriff closer, his breathing becoming weaker and weaker. Don't look for her among the dead, Tom. She didn't go anywhere. She's been here all this time, under the city. They gave her to the roots, the doctor. Old Dr. Evans. He knows where the key is. They all wear silver Wolf rings. The mayor, the chief, your father. Ben suddenly shuddered, his eyes rolling and his grip loosening. The last phrase escaped his lips with a barely audible exhale. He is not a stranger. The one who was hanged at the sawmill. He is the mayor's son who escaped 15 years ago. Ben fell silent. Lynch slowly stood up, breathing heavily. The sheriff's hands were in the blood of the only witness. The trap closed suddenly. The silence of the hospital wing was broken by a sound that made the hair stand on end. Deep in the corridor near the exit, heavy bolts slammed shut. The killer did not escape. He locked Lynch inside the building. At the same moment, the radio on Thomas's belt hissed, and Martha's panicked voice from the morgue broke through the interference. Sheriff, are you here? The body of the mayor's son from the sawmill. It disappeared from the autopsy room. Someone turned off the lights. I hear footsteps in the hallway. Oh my God, Tom, he had a ... The connection ended with a short, eerie scream, followed by a long, deadline beep. Lynch clenched his gun in his hand. Valewood wasn't just guarding its secrets. The town was hunting down those who tried to reveal them. Who could Lynch trust now that his own father was part of the circle, and how would he escape the St. Jude trap and save Martha? Asterisk.